Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Jacqueline Zacharias, and today I'm bringing you the second video in this colt starting series with this colt by Metallic Melis. So yesterday we went over 3 foundational exercises that I want to teach every single one of my horses within the first session, and that was lunging both directions, doing the hip yield, and teaching the backup. So that really starts to give me some real communication with that horse, some really fundamental building blocks that I can use going forward from there. So I get a little bit of control in the feet, some direction, some purpose, and from there we can build into so many other things. If you guys hear a bunch of noise in the background, we actually have a crew here working on our house at the moment. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on all the, it sounds obnoxious to me. There's a lot of noise in the background, but I'm hoping that my mic doesn't pick it up. If it does, that's what it is. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So the first thing that I'm going to do today is to recap some of those things that the horse that we taught yesterday, and I want to see how he lunges and how he backs up and how he remembers some of those things. I'm going to go ahead and send him off here. I'm going to point, I'm going to ask that horse to send off, and when I do this, I'm going to walk toward that horse if he starts to move his feet away, okay? So I'm going to stay with him, but I'm not going to tug on that horse. I'm not going to try and hold him in place because we're not going to win a wrestling match with a horse. That's not going to happen. So again, I give him the direction that I want him to go, and then I start driving the neck and the shoulder away from me, okay? And I drive my energy in that direction. Once I can get the horse's shoulders going that direction, then the rest of the horse, we can get the rest of the horse moving forward, okay? I'm going to go ahead and ask for a disengage here. It was really good. He's coming along really well with these things, and I'm excited to see that he's remembering and retaining so much of this information. So what I'm going to work on here with this disengage is that I want to see this horse do a true disengage. A lot of times we'll get a little bit of a hip yield and the horse will move his hip away when we ask them to, but I want to see the inside hind foot, so the foot that's closest to me, cross over the other one, okay? Not to where he's sucking back and he's crossing like this with that inside foot behind the other one. I want to see a true disengage where that horse stops his front feet and crosses over and thinks through this whole process, and the inside hind foot is crossing over the other one, okay? So pretty much everything I do on the ground is going to build into something that I do under saddle. And when I ask for a disengage under saddle, that's to get softness through the rib cage and through the whole horse. If my horse is sucking back and crossing behind himself while doing this disengage, it's kind of an ineffective exercise. So think about that as you're working on this. Get that inside hind foot to cross over the other one. You're working on getting softness through the whole body, because as we get a little bit more control of this horse's hip, that is not the end goal, just to get some control of the hip. It's to get the rib cage to soften, the shoulder to soften, and all we're using is some energy and breaking down the different parts of the horse so we can do that. So now what we want to do here is to give this horse a moment and just soak on the things he's done already. I don't always show this in my videos because obviously we're trying to keep things moving along. We want to be considerate to the viewer so we don't have a bunch of time where that horse is sitting and standing still. But when you're working on these things with your horse, I want you to be very considerate of your horse, and when he gets something right, stop and let him soak for a while. That is so important. So I want to point out just how much better he's lunging today versus yesterday. He's got a really beautiful arc through his body. His rib cage is getting so much softer, and he's not pulling on me. I really like how focused he is on me. There's a lot less talking out of his horse. He's getting much more comfortable around me, and that is such a great sign. I love to see the progress. So he's responding really well to all of this, and for the sake of the viewers, we're going to go ahead and work on our next step, which is desensitizing. With this desensitizing exercise, what you're going to do is just kind of throw that stick and string over the horse's back a little bit, rub him, and then take it off again. You're going to throw it over his back again, rub it, and take it off again, okay? I don't start with a bunch of escalated energy. This is more like just if you're kind of swinging your arm up to the horse, rubbing him, and then taking it away, but you're doing it with a stick and string. And so we want him to adapt to the energy and kind of see the string flying past him and stuff like that. Just very mild stimulus, but also we're checking to see where he's at and how he's handling things. He's handling this very well. Like I said, let's bring the energy up a little bit. But if you have a horse that's worried about this, and some people are going to watch this and think, why is she being so quiet around this horse? He clearly can handle more, and that is true, but there's going to be so many horses that can't. A lot of times when you see me do these training videos, then it doesn't look like the horse needs these things, but I promise you there's horses out there that this is very vital for. You want your horse to realize that you're not going to make that anxiety spike. You're going to hold his hand every step of the way and read him, take the feedback he's giving you and acknowledge it, okay? So once a horse realizes that you're acknowledging their feedback and that you can read them and that you can understand what they're going through, they're going to progress much faster because they can trust you. Next, we're going to ask this horse to handle some pressure at a walk. So just because a horse can handle pressure at a standstill doesn't mean he can handle it in motion. And the reason this is so important is that often I'll see people starting these exercises and, well, they are doing the exercise correctly, technically what they're missing is that maybe that horse is shut down a little bit and internalized some of his fear, and he's just standing there frozen thinking, okay, if I don't move, they can't see me and nothing bad is going to happen to me, okay? That's not happening with this horse, but again, I want you guys to run through the checklist. So we're going to send that horse off at a walk, and I'm going to start throwing the stick and string over his back while he's walking. And every time you see the horse stop and shut down, that kind of answers that question there, that that horse had some doubts about what was happening. And I'm happy to see him stop because, as we always say, no one ever fell off a horse that spooks in place. So if a horse starts to second guess things and he stops instead of bolting or running off, that is a very good sign. However, we want to get this horse comfortable enough to where he can walk forward and through this and he's not worried about anything happening behind him. This isn't an exercise to tell the horse, no, you're not allowed to stop. This is an exercise to figure out where that horse is at and how he's feeling so you can help him work through his lack of confidence. So 3 times now I've thrown the rope over his back and he maintained impulsion, so I'm going to ask him to stop now and we're just going to rest for a moment. I'm going to break things up a little bit and check on his backup. He wants to step up into my space every time we stop, so this is a great opportunity to work on that. We're going to go ahead and work on this backup, and like I talked about yesterday, I don't want you to bluff your horses here. So once you start moving, you need to continue to move until that horse moves his feet, okay? I'm going to start slow. I'm just going to add a little bit of energy and then bring it up until that horse starts backing up, okay? So once that horse is actually moving, we're going to stop adding more energy to it. So we want to start with the cue that we'd like to use for the finished result, okay? And then I'm going to continuously add energy till I get the result I'm looking for. And once I get the result, I'm going to stop adding energy. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to the lunging and throwing that rope over his back. I like to kind of switch my program up here quite a bit, throw different things in there, throw exercises in there so that we don't get the horse numb to one certain thing or to where we think we've gotten him used to it. So we move on to the next thing and never come back to it, only to find out that it wasn't actually that thorough. And when we took his mind off of it, then he actually lost recollection of what we were working on. So you want to switch things up, always come back to the exercises you worked on before, keep things interesting for the horse, but don't drill and drill and drill on it until something becomes mundane and they tune you out. So he's pretty thorough with that. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is start slapping the rope on the ground softly. The more we can set up these situations for the horse where he learns to get comfortable with your energy and the energy that's added around him and learns to trust you through different scenarios, the better off you're going to be when you get in the saddle. Everything we do at these stages is to build connection and trust. When a horse walks through something he's worried about with us and comes out on the other side more confident, that creates a stronger bond of trust. So now I'm going to go ahead and walk away and let him follow me while moving the stick. And the reason that I like to do this and kind of desensitize while I'm walking away from them is because that allows the horse to feel a little bit more in charge of the situation, okay? It's much less threatening if you are walking away from the horse and adding noise and adding stimulus than if you're turning around, facing him with all that energy and you're asking him to accept it while you throw the stick and string around. And there's visual stimulation, there's auditory stimulation, there's a lot of stuff happening that can be so much more threatening for the full horse if you're facing him versus if you turn around and walk away and let him follow you. So that is one thing that I really like to do with these objects that add a lot of noise. Just like I would if my horse saw a wagon or a car or something like that. I would not ever ask the car to drive at me to desensitize my horse. I wouldn't ask a team of horses to start running at me with a wagon in order to get my horse broke to it. What I would do is turn around and follow that thing as it passed, okay, whether it's the drag and the arena and the tractor. I always let my horses follow it. So the same thing applies when you have a stick and string or a flag or a tarp, okay? Now I'm gonna go ahead and face him while doing the same thing. He's fairly confident, but I can tell he's mildly uncomfortable. He just stepped forward, so I'm going to gently ask him to back up again and stay out of my space. I'm gonna give him a moment and then we're gonna go back to desensitizing. I try very hard not to wait until the horse gets worried before I stop. I usually just do 1, 2, or 3 times and then leave it alone. I don't wait for them to give the wrong answer before I release the pressure, and I've talked about this so many times, because then you've opened up a whole other can of worms. If you stop when they're still in a good place, you've won. You've gotten ahead. I want him to know that when I start doing these desensitizing exercises, then he can just put his head down, relax, and kind of zone out. Okay, that's the place I want him to get, is a little bit of a zen moment for that horse when the energy starts escalating, okay? I don't want it to go the other way. I only want my horse to respond to my intent. When I bring my energy up and say, hey, something has to happen here, that's when I want my horse to say, okay, I need to step up and do something. We don't want our horses reacting to the energy around them. We want them to respond to the energy we give them, okay? Two very different things. I really like how things are going up to this point, so now we're gonna go ahead and work on the tarp. So the two main things I want to be able to do with the tarp is to rub them all over with it, and then to be able to have them walk over it on the ground. I believe the first builds confidence for the second, so that's where we're gonna start. Now notice how I kind of gather it up. The more worried my horse is about it, the more I am going to kind of gather this tarp up so it doesn't have the opportunity to blow in the wind and really scare them or startle them, okay? This horse is a little less worried, I can already tell that, so that's why I don't have it as balled up as much as I normally would. But I want you guys to take those little things into consideration that are going to help your horse if you have one that's a little bit more reactive to this kind of stuff. If your horse is still freaking out when he sniffs the tarp or when you approach him with it, maybe it's not the best decision to go and try and make contact with it anywhere else on his body, okay? Let him get confident approaching it and sniffing it before you move on. And once again, your energy needs to give them confidence. So when you approach that horse, don't be timid. Don't be leaning forward and sneaking up on them and stuff. I'm going to walk up to them very confidently and make contact and then start rubbing them with it. Once I've made contact, I'm going to rub them all over like this. You want to make sure that you're applying a fair amount of pressure so you're not simply tickling or aggravating your horse, okay? We're going to switch sides. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to go ahead and step away, make him engage with the tarp, and we're going to follow it once again. Because of how well he's handling it, I'm going to go ahead and shake the tarp a little, make some noise, test his response to it, and then go back to petting him. He's handling all of this incredibly well and hasn't showed me any signs of being worried about it. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next stage and mildly sack him out with the tarp a little bit. I don't necessarily love that term, but I don't exactly have a better one for it. So once my horse is responding well to the other pressure, then I'm just going to go ahead and start kind of throwing it up on him like I would with a saddle pad. That's what we're prepping for right here. Eventually I want to be able to drag the tarp off his back. I'd like to be able to pick up objects off the fence at any point without startling him. So getting him used to this sort of thing really sets the foundation for that. After doing this for a few moments, I'm going to step away and let him take a breather, and then we're going to go ahead and start again. Every time I stop when that horse is doing what he's supposed to, it confirms in his mind that he's doing the right thing, and it builds their confidence and understanding so much faster than if I were to go on and on without these pauses. This step is important because remember, what we're doing here is building up to having this horse being saddled and ridden. If you can't toss a tarp over your horse's back comfortably, you're going to have trouble getting a saddle up there without him worrying about it. But keep in mind when you're working on this that you keep the horse's nose straight at first. Slowly cross the tarp over their back as you rub them instead of just tossing it over there and hoping for the best. What can happen if you just chuck a tarp over their back when they're not expecting it and he happens to see it on the outside is that they might jump towards you and end up on top of you, okay? Don't ask me how I know this. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of horses, and in the beginning, you don't always think about these things, so keep that in mind. I'll go ahead and do the other side, gradually building the energy. He's handling this so well, and I think we're ready to move on to the next step. Once again, I want to remind you guys that this is not how it will look for every horse. With some horses, you're going to spend a whole session just getting the horse used to where you can rub them on the shoulder with it, or maybe where you can bring it up and let them sniff it. And I want you to be okay with that, all right? I talk so much about confidence and trust, and in reality, those are the only two things that matter when we're trying to get a horse trained. So if a horse is worried, he won't absorb information. You might think that you've gotten something big done, and then you'll come out the next day and that horse is going to be twice as worried about it as he was the day before. If you forced it, if you added too much pressure, if you just got him to shut down and freeze and accept what was happening around him without him actually absorbing the information. Get your horse confident, get him relaxed, and you're going to be miles ahead in the end. Now we're going to go ahead and spread the tarp out and move on to the next step. You always want to be sure that your tarp is anchored in some way. So you can see me, I'm kicking sand over the edge of it here to make sure that that edge is weighted so that the horse's hooves won't catch on it while he's attempting to cross, or if the wind blows it up, it's not going to blow it up under his belly and traumatize him. Obviously, he could still drag it with the foot while crossing, but it's going to be better off if it's weighted a little bit. I can't tell you how many times I've seen horses traumatized by tarps specifically in so many ways because someone tried to rush this step and ended up setting themselves so far back in the end, okay? Not to go off on a tangent, but one of the things that I'm so strongly against is tying scary objects to horses and expecting them to get over it by dragging it around or by being in proximity with it. Unfortunately, I learned this lesson the hard way. Forcing a horse to be in close proximity to something is not necessarily going to teach them to trust it, okay? A lot of horses will internally shut down and they will survive until it's removed, and then they will have a lifelong fear of it. It may work for some, but don't take your chances on this. Don't try to tie scary objects to your horses, especially not tarps. They're terrifying, okay? Take your time on this. I can't emphasize that enough. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and ask them to step up to the tarp and investigate. When I introduce a new obstacle to my horses, my number one goal in the beginning is to build curiosity. I want them to acknowledge and engage with whatever it is that I'm showing to them. This is why confidence is so important. If you spent all your exercise up to this point with the main objective being to build confidence and connection, your horses will be willing to engage and explore. But if you've gotten them to obey through fear, all that fear will only be expounded each time you approach a new challenge, okay? I don't care if he walks around this, that's okay. His hooves touched the corner and he wasn't overly bothered by it. I'll just ask him to stop and we'll go ahead and try again. Once again, he detoured the tarp, and that's okay. Eventually, I'll get him to step on the corner, but he trotted here, which shows a little bit of worry about the situation, even though the rest of his body language isn't showing a lot of concern about it. So let's go the other way, and I'd like for him to stay at a walk. Notice how I don't push him through here. He's engaging, he's exploring, I let him take his time. Now I'm gonna pet him and walk away. I want leaving to be my decision, not his. And that doesn't mean that I'm trying to control the situation in every aspect. It means that, once again, we don't wait for the horse to get scared before we stop. We take the horse away while he's still in a good place. So that's why it's my job to make that my decision and help the horse through this. All right, we're gonna circle back again, and I'm gonna go ahead and walk over the tarp to show him it's not dangerous, and then I'll send him off again. So I want to talk about this a little bit because we've kind of accepted, with horse training, especially with some of the bigger names that have been influencing horsemanship over the past few decades, that we need to send our horses everywhere. And if we come across a scary situation, then you need to send them over because that shows control and leadership, so on and so forth. But I personally believe there are so many times that if a horse sees you as their leader and as someone who's been walking them up to all these scary situations, if they see you tackle the obstacle first, they see you walk over a scary tarp, I don't know what it does for them, but I've seen the effects numerous times that it really helps them to gain a little bit more courage about approaching the situation themselves. Because if you won't even cross it, they're like, why should I do it? You're supposed to be my leader. You're supposed to be giving me confidence here. And yet you will not cross that obstacle. You're trying to force me to do it first. And I'm pretty sure that's a terrifying situation to be in. So I do not mind walking over obstacles first with my horse, and maybe they'll follow me, maybe they won't. If they don't, that's okay, but I want them to hear and see me crossing the obstacle, whether it's a creek, whether it's a tarp, whether it's a bridge. And there are times it's not feasible and you just need your horse to go ahead and cross when you ask them to. We want every horse to get to the point where no matter what you ask them to do, they do it without arguing, without questioning what you're asking them to do, because they trust you. But how do you get that trust if you've never walked through these small situations first? And that's the problem, is that people expect all this trust and obedience right off the bat instead of a year down the road, 3 months down the road, however long into the future, where you've shown this horse that you are reliable and trustworthy. That's what I want to point out, is that you need to be willing to sometimes show your horse that. Now you can see he's actually arguing with me a little bit, so I'm going to add some energy and ask him to get off the halter and step toward me. This is why creating draw is so important. This isn't a wrestling match, but I do want to keep guiding him forward. He doesn't want to come forward with me, so the next step is to get the feet moving again. A lot of people get stuck in this trap to where they zone in on one thing. They're like, I'm going to pull you forward. You're going to walk forward toward me. But that's not necessarily the answer, okay? Often if your horse locks up in his feet, his mind is also locked up too. So what you need to do is to just get the feet moving forward, no matter where it is. Get the horse answering you again, and then you can work on that draw a little bit more and go back to your scary obstacle. We get back to the tarp now. And there I had to make a little bit of a stronger correction when he took his face and rooted into the halter to get some leverage on me. You always want to keep your body energy quiet though, because this is not a fight. This is not something to stress about. You're here to give the horse confidence and guidance. Notice how I sent him up to the tarp here and then let him rest. This wasn't an attempt to get him to cross, but rather to set it up where there's a place to breathe and a moment to relax. Once again, I'm going to make it my decision to step away, and then we'll rest a moment and let him soak. It's so important that if at any point your horse becomes confused about what you're asking him to do, or simply says, I'm not ready for this, that you go back to the previous steps and work on building your connection back up. Once his mind is willing and back on track, we can go back to the tarp. We're sending him off here again. We're going to guide him to the tarp and let him make the decision about what he wants to do here. This is the natural progression that horses will make if you set clear boundaries, communicate well, and always focus on building confidence. I'm going to praise him, scratch him, pet on him, and just take a moment before we go back to the tarp. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the right one more time, then we'll call it a day. My goal here was for him to walk up to the tarp in a relaxed way, cross it in a relaxed way, and then stop, knowing that he'd reached his objective and knowing that he'd just done the job right. Look how quiet his eyes are and how calm he is through this whole body. That's a horse that feels capable and knows his job. That is a horse that's starting to build confidence in my adeptness as a leader, and that makes me so happy to see. All right, guys, so that ties up session 2 with Rev. In the next video, we're going to be working on the flag and the flank rope, getting this horse ready for his first time saddling. Leave a comment below if you have any questions or just anything you want to add to the conversation. I always enjoy interacting with you guys, and seeing what you have to say truly does make my day. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.